Hey everybody, it's Broken Dice bringing another installment of my solo wargaming ideas, and hope you enjoy this. Uh, I'm working on some strategic values, kind of a quick little review here, why I'm doing this, and I'm looking at something that can help as a solo game. I mean, it'll work differently when you're playing with an actual opponent. But in solo gaming, what I want to do is I want to put decision making opportunities on the table. And I think giving random strategic value to units on the opposite side of the table and on my side of the table, the army I would be running if I'm going to actually participate, or like I do when I'm doing like um, information gathering, I do it like I call it the view from above, where I'm not really a participant. I'm not trying to defeat this other side. I'm really just trying to see what's going on here and see if what I'm trying to do actually works. Okay, so in this game, rolling out the strategy dice after deployment on both sides of the table is fairly even points wise. There's a little bit of a difference, but not much. So in this case, is it better to play the game straight up and not adjust your tactics to the number of strategic points that may exist on the other side of the table? Because what you have is of a similar value, so it may wind up, if you play the game, it may wind up uh, a wash at the end. Okay, much like the very first game I did with this, I went through it and it became strategically points. It was about the same by the end of the game. Tactically, it was a victory for one side or the other, but strategically, it wasn't devastating either way. Okay, so when you have basically an equal distribution of strategy points, the game kind of plays out, I think, rather normally. Let's just say, if you have a situation where your strategy points are skewed, where one side has a lot of like 1 point units and the other side has a lot of 3, 4, 5 point units, yet tactically on the table they are of similar value. Now we're talking about a different type of scenario where perhaps like in a campaign setting you would have a tremendous advantage than if you were able to collect a lot of strategic points for your tabletop victory, let's say. Now, I want to do is I want to talk about some specific situations on this table and what it's going to be like, and then I'm going to play this thing out, and I'll come back and I'll do another video where I talk about whether those situations were actually relevant or not. Okay, so let's pause this and move down the table a little bit. Okay, on this side of the table, we have two units, one a sub commander and one the most valuable unit tactically on this side of the table and strategically. So you have your large medium cavalry unit, not large, but a regular medium cavalry unit. It has bows, spears. It's got marksmen. It's this side of the table's best unit, and it has a high strategic value. So what do you do? Do you husband that? Do you take care of it? Do you try not to waste it in some combat, and where you not only tactically you lose your best unit, but you also lose a large number of strategic points? Do you hold it off to the very end and try to get something out of it on the tabletop, but don't risk it for the entire game. That's a choice to be made. Throw the sub commander in there, then all of a sudden that unit and sub commander, that's 10 strategy points. That's an awful lot of points to use to uh, garner new skills, increase attributes, and stuff like that. Now, eventually you have to put a limit on it, obviously, because I haven't figured out how many strategic points per attribute point of increase that you need to spend. That's a different sort of mathematical equation we're going to have to come up with. But here, this is on the tabletop a tactical decision for the owning player and for the opposing player. Do they throw everything they got at it? 10 points of strategy goes a long way. You could literally get pummeled on the tabletop and come out with more strategic value in a situation like this. Especially like if we had more white chips on the table where units were only worth one strategic point. Oh my goodness, go after those big points, and you take that, it's worth the entire rest of the army, maybe. So those situations can happen. Gives you something tactically to think about. Let's move on to a different tactical decision. Okay, on the same side of the table, but on the other flank, we have this small unit of Sparabara, and it is also worth 5 strategic points. Oh goodness. Now this is a unit that has limited tactical value on the table. It's a small unit, only going to shoot so much. It's limited combat value, because it has high strategic value. Well, obviously, that becomes the target for the other side as far as trying to garner some strategic points and that sort of thing. That would be the one to get. It would take the least amount of effort for the most amount of reward. Uh, as the owning player, then, what do? You only have so many units on the table. You can't protect all of them. You're going to have to risk something at some time. So what are we going to do? That's an interesting dilemma. That's what I'm looking for on the tabletop. This sort of dilemma, decision making. Do I let them do the thing that they're supposedly good at doing and then throw caution to the wind, or do I try to put them in a position where they can only support a unit and not be directly involved in combats and stuff, so therefore I rely on the other units' stamina and morale to help keep them on the tabletop? Interesting question. All right, let's go look at the other side of the table. Well, first up on this side of the table, we have I use basically everything's a standard unit, so I'm not going to do too many small units, let's just say. But this unit on the far end here, maybe this camera down to this a little bit, has the black chip behind it, and represents 5 points of strategic value. Now, it's not facing anything of concern. It's probably better than most everything that's across the table, because this is a medium infantry unit. It has bows and spears and all that kind of stuff. So it's fairly capable for the time period. Next to it is a standard unit of archers, and then beside that is another medium unit with spears and bows and marksmen and stuff. So on this end of the table, I would feel comfortable employing this one against whatever is across the table. Now, if something else was across the table, say a large cavalry unit or combat unit of equal or greater value, then on this side of the table, you'd have a strategic concern about losing that many strategy points from that unit. So let's all move down because there's another thing I want to talk about on this side of the table. So here we have a situation in which you have a Seathwell chariot that has a high strategic value and limited tabletop tactical value. If you know how these things work in Hail Caesars, you charge them in, they do damage on their clash, and then they're removed from the table. Automatically removed. Now, in the second game I played, the strategic anomaly were these two Seathwell chariots maxed out their damage, defeated the unit, and the units broke. So even though I lost both chariots, both opposing units were broken, and there was a big gap. Basically, those two big units in the middle were gone, and that was the end of the game because there was really nothing that could really be salvaged because the cavalry force on the other side got where it had to flee because it had too many strategic points to be lost, and it was significantly outnumbered and outgunned basically, and was going to get waylaid badly. So they had to flee. So the game kind of ended with not only a tactical victory, but also a strategic victory for this side of the table, what I call the king's side. It's an interesting dilemma that the owning player has here. Throw it in, give away 5 points of strategy, or try to hide it. Try to move it around to where, because it has that frenzied charge that if something is within charge range, it has to charge it. So how do you protect it from itself? It's kind of an interesting dilemma, like back in the old days with your what was that in Warhammer Fantasy? Goblin fanatics. You always tried to you didn't want to have them pulled out of the unit too quickly. Yeah. So that kind of falls into this kind of category, or that sort of, do I protect it from itself? And then the last thing to talk about on this side of the table is a small unit of skirmishing. Let's just move the camera a little bit, and you see this small unit of horse archers. It also, let's move that over there. There we go. It also has a value of 5 strategically. Not a very big. You don't want this unit in combat. You want it running around shooting and not getting shot at. Strategically valuable, tactically limited. And again, another sort of choice to be made on its use on the tabletop. And a different kind of use on the tabletop is if you look at that medium cavalry unit, it's only worth 1 strategy point. So that's a unit that has high tabletop tactical value, limited, very low, let's say, as low as you can get strategic value. So that unit, you'd feel confident using it in the normal way in which that medium cavalry unit should be used. Yeah, be interesting. Very, very interesting how to use that one. And let's back this guy. Got this on the edge of the table here. Let's back this up. So this is the heavy unit. This has like a 4+ morale, and this is the top unit on the table, and it's on the king's side, and its tactical value is 2. So when it comes to the game itself, throwing in, let's move this way. There we go. Throwing in those cavalry units from this owning player side of the table will be to his advantage because his units are almost as low as they can be strategically and as powerful as they can be tactically. And that's that kind of, you're doing like a chart there where you know, as their value goes up and their tactical value goes up, if their strategic points are low, then that line's going to cross at a certain spot. It's yeah. I'm this would be a great tactical advantage on this side of the table because everybody's aware that you'll lose points on the tabletop, but if you add something on top like this, you have to be kind of aware of that when you're throwing your units into the fray, let's say. Well, when they have this low strategic value, where you don't have to worry about, like, if they lose, at least he's not going to get so many points, and perhaps I've already made those points up somewhere else on the tabletop. Just adding a little bit more problem solving on the table, especially when you're playing solo, because that's what makes solo gaming interesting. There's, like I've talked about this before. There's several ways to do it. You can go down to the minutia of terrain and units involved and names, and try to get as historically as possible to a historical refight. Or you can go the other way, where with this I'm trying just to create a scenario in which it's not just move your stuff across the table and hope for the best and let the dice decide. Here, in this solo sense, I'm trying to acquire extra stuff which will control not only my tactical decision making, but also the tactical decision making of the other side of the table. Okay? Well, that brings us to the end of this video. I'm going to roll some dice, move some troops. I'll go through this and we'll see if the math is consistent enough to make this something viable that I want to pursue. But like I said, this is the kind of the initial stage of this inquiry into this. So let's see how this works out. Everybody stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you next time.